Start the clock.
Good afternoon. At the zone, time will be
Real time.
Hi folks, and welcome to Kilroy's Rants, number 10. Right from the birth of the original document, the BNA Act, the British North American Act that gave rise to Canada as an official country, we can see that the drive towards inclusion of the French language and culture in Canada had begun. The BNA Act proclaimed Canada permits the use of either English or French in the debates in Parliament as well as the proceedings before the federal courts. This section also provides that both languages must be used in the records and journals of the Parliament, and that its laws must be enacted and published in both languages. Throughout the years after that, there was a few interesting but fairly minor acts put through to accommodate the French fact as well. Things like postage stamps that became bilingual in 1927, the Federal Translation Bureau was established by an Act of Parliament in 1934, Canada's banknotes became bilingual in 1936, and in 1959 the idea of simultaneous interpretation of the debates in both languages begins in the House of Commons, all of which the majority Anglophone Canadians embraced wholeheartedly as their way to be inclusive. Then, on July 19, 1963, the government of Prime Minister Lester B. Pearson establishes the Royal Commission on Bilingualism and Biculturalism to inquire into and report upon the existing state of bilingualism and biculturalism in Canada. This commission produces a report which includes the following recommendations: that Ontario and New Brunswick become officially bilingual, that bilingual districts be created in regions of Canada where numbers of the minority community, either French or English, made up 10% or more of the local population, that parents be able to have their children attend schools in the language of their choice in regions where there is sufficient demand, that Ottawa become a bilingual city, that English and French be declared official languages of Canada. Prime Minister Trudeau ensured that many of the Commission's recommendations were permanently applied by including them in the Constitution of Canada, as Sections 16 through Section 23 of the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms incorporates several language rights. However, the wording used in parts of the Act were rendered non-applicable in the province of Quebec, since Trudeau also included something called the Notwithstanding Clause, which allowed provinces to opt out of certain laws. Thus, in the province of Quebec, the one place where any of this could assist the English minority community, the French Quebec government conveniently decided to invoke the Notwithstanding Clause in order to get around having to provide for the English minority there. That, along with the powers vested in Bill 101, virtually removed any obligation to provide for the English minority where they would have most needed it, in the province of Quebec. So, here we have it. We end up in a country that forces all corners of Canada to provide for and service the French minority throughout, while the French in Quebec have basically outlawed the English language and the English culture in that province. As you can see, what began as well-intentioned acts of fairness and kindness on behalf of the Anglophone majority, trying to be accepting and accommodating to the French language and the French culture, that has slowly but most certainly mushroomed into a one-sided arrangement, to say the least. New Brunswick, with its 30% minority French population to the 70% Anglophone population, has indeed declared itself officially bilingual, but many of the Anglophone majority living there will tell you that it has only benefited the French minority in the sense that it has become a virtual dead zone as far as jobs go, since most require bilingualism as a prerequisite. Ottawa, though it's resisting the constant pressure to become officially bilingual, has two other forces that help push this same agenda anyways. The fact that much of Ottawa falls under the so-called National Capital Region means that most areas are supposed to provide bilingual services under that cloak, and secondly, because the French are so entrenched in the whole area surrounding Ottawa, with the fact that Quebec is only a 10-minute drive across the bridge, most jobs in Ottawa require bilingualism as well. So you can see that with the manipulations and personal infusions by the various political forces and their minions over the years, the original good intent of providing French within the federal government to a tiny French minority in Canada has grown over time and basically only provided a job bank for the French throughout all of Canada, wherever bilingualism is deemed necessary. It would seem that the sense of kindness and accommodation that the Anglophones extended to the French all these years is coming back to bite the very people that provided the kindness and fairness in the first place. The solution? Well, some are saying we use the where numbers warrant criteria for bilingualism throughout all of Canada. That is what is being passed off as a real solution, but there is something very critical and important being left out there. And that is a nasty little thing that some only latch onto when it benefits their side, something called history. Yeah, the fact is, sometime back in Canada's history, this system, shall we call it, for lack of a better term at the moment, was put in place to ensure that the playing field would eventually be slanted in favor of the preferred player. That is to say, in this case, it was implemented by Trudeau and other powers that be at that time to ultimately benefit the French. So, though it may appear to be a noble act and a good solution to try solving this situation by trying to find the true numbers in order to make this fair, the fact is, the already built-in historical bias simply puts the Anglophones at a complete disadvantage from the get-go. No, that's not the solution. And it's not the solution for more than one reason. Allow me to explain. Bilingualism is the tool through which the French are ultimately moving towards a total and complete French-dominant Canada. The proof? Well, if all of this were really about bilingualism and cohabiting together in this country, then why is it that Quebec is not teaching its citizens English? They are, in fact, not only not teaching them English, but they have also shown the rest of Canada time and time again that they want nothing to do with the English language or the English culture, i.e., the various laws in the province of Quebec that actually prohibit and outlaw the English language. No, bilingualism is simply an interim state to them.
I mean, when you examine what's really happening, you've got to conclude that the main reason we want everyone in Ontario to speak French and English is so that Quebecers only have to speak French.
Since they wish to remain French only, while forcing the rest of Canada to become so-called French, bilingual, this means that the whole country will ultimately be French dominant. More and more people in Quebec cannot even speak English at all, and those that can speak English often refuse to speak it. Like they say, bilingualism to the French is death.
Si on n'impose pas une langue commune, on va mourir. Le bilinguisme pour les francophones, c'est la mort.
Quebec isn't interested in bilingualism.
Assimilation, assimilation, remove the English or there will be assimilation. Run, there are English present. Run, take your kids from that school bus. Run. This is a constant mantra from the French. No, the real solution? This country is called Canada. The common language in this country is English. And just as the French say when speaking about the province of Quebec,
there has to be a common language in the country. It's French or English. Well, I think that when you're 82% of the population, the majority wants it to be French.
Which they deem to be an actual separate nation. If you want to live in Quebec, you must speak French.
If you live in Quebec, you have to understand and to speak French.
Therefore, the solution is, we take a page directly from them and say if you want to live in Canada, you must speak English. Let's face it, it's much easier for perhaps the 1% of the French population, I'm guessing, but I know it's a tiny number nonetheless, who don't know English at all, to learn it when venturing outside the province of Quebec into the country called Canada, or to venture anywhere else for that matter in the world. Also, the French can still live in Canada and keep their French language and so on, but if they choose not to move to Quebec, it's understood that just like it is French in Quebec, well, it's English in Canada. Fair and simple, much less costly.
We're not separated yet. When we get separated, he can do what he wants, but right now we're not separated yet.
In closing, to my fellow Anglophones I say, be very wary of what is really going on here, and also be wary of the wolf in sheep's clothing. and what may appear on the surface to be real solutions. The truth is just that, the truth. Buying into where numbers warrant as a solution is selling out to their side. Realistically, if it were indeed really about bilingualism, a twofold concept, they would allow and encourage their people to learn English as well, and would not be outlawing the English language in their province. But hey, they don't and do.